Hello everybody! Today it's time for some more statistics and a check-in on my reading goals. I do these videos quarterly because it helps me keep on track with things and be aware of where my reading is taking me and have I come anywhere near close to achieving my goals for the year. So today I'm going to be talking about my stats up through the end of September. We're already quite a ways into October. This video is a little bit late, so I know while filming this that the numbers are already different, but this is the snapshot from basically the last week of September. So without any more preamble, you guys know what kind of video this is. Let's get into it. So I read 188 things in the first 9 months of the year. 130 were books, 25 were novellas, and 33 were comics or manga. 64 of those things were by male authors, 110 were by female authors, and 9 were by both, and 5 were by non-binary authors. I think I should clarify at this moment that I'm using non-binary as a bit of a catch-all category. I'm aware that non-binary is not the same thing as genderqueer, is not the same thing as gender fluid, but for the purposes of my spreadsheet, I'm kind of putting things into the same NB box right now. So what this tells me right now is I need to read more books by men that are on my TBR. I've been neglecting them. I don't think I've ever seen such a heavy skew towards works by female authors, and it's not like I'm trying to read more books by women. I just keep prioritizing them. So I need to bring it a little bit back to a 50-50 split. We'll see if I can do that. For genres, not much has changed since the last update. My most read genres are science fiction at 28.2%, fantasy at 27.6%, nonfiction is now in third place with 10.1%, romance has been bumped up to 6.4%, and poetry is now 5.8%. I've read 5% or less from a host of other categories, including anthologies, classics, collections, drama, historical fiction, horror, humor, literary fiction, magical realism, mainstream or contemporary works, memoir, mystery, and steampunk. I would really like to increase my science fiction reading percentage. I've been reading less science fiction and more fantasy than usual this year, but I've also been going kind of just where my heart wants to go genre-wise, and that's also okay. That's part of the reason why I've been reading a lot more romance this year, and also why I've been reading across such a variety of genres. I try to continually pick up science fiction, but I'm always being distracted by other things as well. Now for sources. I usually just look at the split between paid and free sources, basically, and it's very different this time. 38% of what I've read has been paid for, or I've owned it in one way or another. 62% were from free sources, which mainly means coming from the library or library services like Overdrive. So this has swung wildly towards free sources since my last update, and I think this is probably because I'm finally getting near the end of reading books that I own. I've really whittled down my TBR. I've been reading things pretty quickly after getting to them, and I've been using Overdrive and Hoopla through my library a lot recently. And this is actually the direction I want to go in, and I'm pretty happy with it. I'm very close to achieving my goal for reducing my physical TBR, and I'm feeling really good about a lot of this. And then 10.6% of what I've read has been translated. This number has gone down again. I do want it to stay above 10%, but it would be lovely to see it increase. I'm just gotta work on getting more translated works into my priority list for the rest of the year. And 7.5% of what I've read has been rereads. Once again, this number has gone down. Rereads haven't been a huge priority for me this year, though I have done some rereading and it's been really great, but it's not a goal for me this year. So those are the quick statistics. Now let's look at my goals for the year. Most of these were already achieved, or I talked a lot about them in my previous update, so I'm gonna go pretty quickly through a couple of them. The first goal was to stay within a $600 budget for book buying this year. I talked a bit about how my spending had changed because of the circumstances of the year in the last update, and I was thinking about increasing my budget, which I did do. Since I was spending more per book on average than in previous years, I increased my budget to $750, and I think that may end up being the sweet spot for future years. However, I already know that after a couple of surprise books came out in October, I have gone over that number. We'll talk about that later. So as of the end of September, I had spent $678.68 on books. I've paid an average of $11.31 per book, which is increased from last year where I spent an average of $8.52 per book. I've also bought fewer books this year, 60 total, including some books that I got for free and pre-orders that hadn't arrived yet, whereas by the end of September last year, I'd bought 78 books. I bought a total of 86 books in 2019, and I don't want to exceed that number in 2020. My second goal was to get my physical TBR down to 20 books and to read 80% of what I bought within the year. And I'm doing quite well at this. In my last update, my physical TBR was at 34 books, and it's now down to 28 or fewer, and that, as of me filming this, is after I acquired a bunch of pre-orders that came in October. So I do need to read another probably 10 books by the end of the year to permanently get my TBR down to 20 books, but this is very doable and I'm very happy about that. In my last update, I'd read 72% of the books I'd bought so far in the year, and at the end of September, I had read exactly 80% of what I'd bought. So that means I just need to stay on top of it. I need to read the new books that I've gotten very quickly, and then I'll be good for the rest of the year. I also want to make a note about DNFing and getting rid of books unread from my TBR. Because I have acquisition statistics going back to 2017. So I've got about 4 years of solid data for what books I've acquired, what books I've discarded, and whether I have read those or not. And this is what I've discovered. The sooner I read books that I buy, the less likely I am to DNF them or skip them entirely. So of books I bought in 2017, I DNF'd or have DNF'd so far 11% of them. And for 2018 acquisitions, I've DNF'd 10% of them. And 2018 was the year that I started to really work on getting down my TBR. In 2019, I've DNF'd just 5% of what I'd bought. And that's when I was starting to really slow down my buying and speed up my reading. And in 2020, of all the things I've purchased so far this year, I've read 80% of them and I haven't DNF'd a single one. I haven't skipped any of them. And yeah, I mean, I'm much more likely to enjoy what I've bought when I read it while I'm still in the mood for it. And I'm far less likely to DNF it because I've lost interest in it. Of course, a side effect of spending less on books, buying fewer books, having that book budget is that I think a lot harder about what I actually want to buy. I'm not impulse purchasing things so much, which means I have much more motivation and interest in what I am buying, and that right there means I'm more likely to read it, more likely to want to read it very soon. I just thought this was an interesting little side tangent that I noticed when I was pulling out stats for this update. My third goal was to start 2 new reading projects, the SF Masterworks and the Otherwise Award winner projects. I had done both of these much earlier in the year, and there are multiple videos up for those projects now. And the fourth goal that I added in June, I don't think I've ever done this before, adding a major reading goal halfway through the year, but I decided I wanted to read 25 books by Black authors this year, and I only started counting those books in June. There were actually 3 books by Black authors that I have on my list that I read prior to June, but I'm not counting them towards this particular challenge. So by the end of September, by September 30th, I had read 24 books by Black authors in between June and September. I've decided I'm going to bump up this goal to 35 books by Black authors by the end of the year. I may be able to exceed this, but I just wanted to stretch myself a little bit more. So the reason why I did this is obviously because I realized I thought I hadn't read any books by Black authors by June of this year, and I was extremely disappointed in myself for that. And so I just pulled all of this big list of books that I already knew I wanted to read, that were already on my various want to read and TBR lists that were by Black authors. I put them all into one big list and I started reading them. And it has genuinely been one of the most exciting and fun things I've done all year. I'm not entirely sure why, but I think it's because it was such a diverse list in authors that I had read before and I already knew that I loved, the excitement of getting into new authors that I never tried before, a variety of genres. I didn't limit myself to just science fiction or fantasy works by Black authors. It was basically anything goes. So I've read poetry and nonfiction and romance and literary fiction and various other things by authors of color and Black authors particularly. And it's been so much fun. That's also why I wanted to bump up this challenge and keep doing it, is because heck yeah, reading diversely is very rewarding. And I'm much happier with myself. And I think that what I've learned from this particular challenge is I should probably do another one next year and keep this in mind. Make sure that I am checking how many works I'm reading by authors of color, how many works I'm reading by Black authors as kind of a subset of the authors of color category, and make sure that I'm doing that, because my sense of what I've been reading is frequently not the same thing as reality. I have to check myself sometimes, and when I look at the diversity of my reading, the more diverse it is across any sort of way that you want to measure diversity, the more fun it is, the more enjoyable, the more I've learned from it. So this is something I definitely need to continue in the future. So that is it for this very chatty update. I'm very pleased with how things have gone so far this year with my reading, and I think a large part of the success is simply that I've been doing the quarterly check-ins and kind of holding myself accountable and actively working towards a lot of these goals. I'm very happy with it. So hopefully you guys have found this update to be enjoyable. I'll be back to talk to you again soon about other things, and until then, bye.